Hey there, Nas here bringing you another what-if scenario about two legendary soldiers, Killer B, aka Cammy White, and David Solid Snake. I would've used that Pliskin guy, we don't see much of him outside of Metal Gear Solid 2. But regardless, what if they switched places? Meaning, in this video we'll be delving into if Cammy could infiltrate and defeat the legendary members of the nefarious FOXHOUND unit, just like Snake did all those years ago. For this scenario, we'll give Cammy the same set of tools for the Shadow Moses incident that Snake had. A relatively full brief of the mission. Colonel Wolfman of Delta Red will act in the place of Colonel Roy Campbell, and the rest of Delta Red will fill in for the place of Snake's mini support team. Also, the Cammy being used will be her from Street Fighter 6, as she's more seasoned in her career. Similarly to how Snake was in Metal Gear Solid 1, as he has already gone through the events of Metal Gear 1 and 2 respectively. Though, I have to note, two major differences will be the exclusion of Meryl and Liquid acting in the guise of Master Miller. Cammy will also be able to use her phone similarly to Snake's codec, but it isn't mentally linked to her brain like Snake's codec is, meaning it's an increased risk if she uses her phone for any communications. Now, with all that jargon out of the way, let's get this mission started. Cammy would arrive in scuba gear at the base and would make her way to the entrance with little issue. She'd listen to Colonel Wolfman's intel via text to avoid being detected and sneak onto the elevator, as she's had plenty of experience with casual infiltration, with her being the top assassin for Shadaloo in her past. In Street Fighter 6, she's known as the Silent Killer in her master montage. Before the events of Street Fighter 4, she infiltrated an SIN laboratory without Chun-Li or Guile's knowledge.
Looks like an ordinary ruined castle at first glance, but security's too tight for that to be the case. What is this place anyway? Looks like a laboratory. What are they researching?
They're onto us. We better move.
She got to the Shadaloo base without the help of Jury or DeCapri in Street Fighter 5. She also infiltrated the SIN base during the tournament in Street Fighter 4 before Rolento's bombs went off. Her battle outfit in Street Fighter 5 is specifically made for her infiltration missions. When she was first dropped off by Vega to Delta Red, had her brainwashing not worn off, she would have done the same thing to Delta Red. So that would dispel any doubts that Cammy would have any trouble figuring out any of the puzzles or nooks and crannies that Shadow Moses would display to her in the beginning portion of the game. She'd take the elevator down and try to rescue the DARPA chief. But wait, if there's no Meryl to free Cammy out of her cell, after the DARPA chief gets wasted, what is she gonna do? Well, Cammy would just have to bust out, just like Chun-Li and Karin did in Street Fighter 5. Cammy should definitely be able to handle the onslaught of soldiers breaking into the room, because of her experience during the event of Cannon Spike. But here comes the difficult part. This is when Psycho Mantis really gets involved. But anyways, Cammy would take heed to the former DARPA chief's words and head back and try to find the Arms Tech CEO. But as we know, she gets ambushed and locked in a duel with Revolver Ocelot. As previously stated, Cammy's prior experience during Cannon Spike will come back during this mission plentiful, as during her battle against Vega, the Spanish ninja who temporarily defected from Shadaloo, Cammy was forced to deal with the same set of circumstances, if not more, since Vega managed to trap Cammy in a confined space with other soldiers ready to fire at her, while on a sliding unit going down with no sign of stopping. Though during the battle, their fight will be cut short due to Grey Fox's intervention. After Cammy's conversation with the Arms Tech CEO ends, she presses on to find Otacon. After a bit of roaming, Cammy would come to the conclusion that she doesn't know where to go. Colonel Wolfman would then likely suggest to advance, and that she'd have to go beyond the cargo door, which, in case you forgot, wouldn't be hard because of, you know. But before she progresses, Ginzu would warn Cammy that if she goes past the infrared sensors, she'll be gassed. So she proceeds with extreme caution. Deep throat, also contacts Cammy about the upcoming tank ambush. The fight against Volk and Raven wouldn't be as difficult as you would think, as Cammy was casually able to do this when she was a child. Eventually, she makes her way to the electric gas room, and Deep Throat would contact her telling her to use the remote-controlled missile to nullify the floor. She'd then witness the victims of Gray Fox's assault and engage him, which should be no problem for Cammy. Given both of their skill sets, Gray Fox would immediately go to his second phase about claiming to go hand to hand, because if you didn't know, Cammy can quite literally use CQC. This battle would be similar to Sting's, the man responsible for creating robot terrorism across the world, and he managed to clone himself several times, in which Cammy needed to dodge multiple blasts from his gun and outsmart him. After she defeated Gray Fox, he escapes, as she helps Otacon out of the locker and asks him more info about Metal Gear. After this, she'd ask Otacon for directions, and he'd tell her to where the floors above and below or where the warhead room could be located. Akiba, so she'd have to trail back and get the key from him, which shouldn't be hard because we all know Johnny's weakness.
Stay away from good-looking women when you're fighting, otherwise you'll get hit with diarrhea.
Huh?
Oh no, my stomach! Not again!
But as soon as Cammy makes it back to check some other rooms, she'd fully run into Psycho Mantis this time, who tries to control her mind as he'd force her to enter his room. And as soon as she does, he'd try to make her pull the trigger on herself. Cammy doesn't understand what's happening, but she's familiar with mind control and knows exactly that this is what's happening. During this, Delta Red would try to contact Cammy by calling her. They'd inform her that the tune being played is how Psycho Mantis is controlling her. Cammy has shown resistance to mind control before, and brainwashing since her Killer Bee days. Eventually, Psycho Mantis would entertain this notion, just like how he could have controlled Snake, like he did Meryl, but instead chose to troll him. But just like Snake, Cammy would have to use another controller, so Psycho Mantis won't be able to read her movements. Inevitably, Psycho Mantis would lead Cammy to the exit, where she would have to sneak past some wolf huskies, which would lead to Sniper Wolf getting a free shot on her, which would force Cammy to leave and go back to get a PSG-1 to defeat Sniper Wolf. Sniping itself shouldn't prove to be too difficult, as she's had Special Forces training when she's been in Delta Red. But unfortunately, she would get ambushed by Wolf's guards. Now normally, I'd argue Cammy could take on all the guards in the area along with Sniper Wolf. For the sake of brevity, let's give the situation the benefit of the doubt, and say Cammy surrenders due to knowing if she knocked them out, she'd get outnumbered very quickly once she got inside. After the torture session, which she has plenty of experience with, while she's locked in the cage without her phone, Otacon can't help to free Cammy by giving her the ketchup packet like he does Snake, so she'd have to hide under the bed to fool Akiba into thinking that she somehow vanished, and use a well-timed spiral arrow to catch him off guard. After this, she'd get her gear back and contact Delta Red to let them know she was alright. She'd eventually reach the roof when she would come into contact with Liquid's Hind D, as he would shoot down the radio telescope. In this case, Cammy would choose to face Liquid head on. After all, she's done the same in Cannon Spike, even with her directly kicking the gunship to smithereens. Later, Cammy would run into Otacon to ask if he can fix the elevator for her, but as soon as he does, it seems to operate perfectly fine. As she heads to the underground maintenance base, Otacon then explains that she's been ambushed. That's when the soldiers would reveal themselves, and Cammy would be forced to take them out. Just like when Vega ambushed her, and again, she would get sniped by Sniper Wolf as soon as she exits. During a blizzard, a fight would be difficult, but Cammy has dealt with a long-range fight during extreme weather conditions before, like her battle against the Jungle Master Sasuke. She'd then leave to go to the underground maintenance base, and she'd have to perform a bit of parkour and balancing. They would try and ambush Cammy on the elevator again, but again, with no luck. Finally, when Cammy reached the elevator down, she would have to confront the shaman Vulcan Raven. Though she'd have to stay out of his range, this fight wouldn't be too dissimilar to her fight against Kabuki. After she beats Raven, he'll give her the security card to advance. When Cammy reaches Metal Gear Rex, she manages to sneak past Liquid and Ocelot and overhear their conversation, and Otacon tells Cammy the way to override Metal Gear Rex. Ocelot shoots at her, which makes her drop it in the same fashion Snake did, and she has to go retrieve it. After she completes the power code sequence, the doors lock and the room is filled with gas. She asks Otacon to unlock the doors and Cammy briefly confronts Liquid. Rex is then activated. Rex is a lot bigger than the usual mech she's familiar with, but she's not totally unfamiliar with the concept. But just then, Gray Fox saves her briefly, but after his death, Cammy has enough motivation to take down Rex once and for all. After she does, she'll be forced to fight Liquid to the death in less than 3 minutes, which is much longer than the average Street Fighter match. After she beats Liquid, she escapes with Otacon out of the parking garage and she shoots down the Genome soldiers. Liquid then appears behind them. But since there was no Fox dye injected into Cammy, Liquid won't go down unceremoniously. But as soon as Liquid fires at Cammy, she would block with one of her gauntlets, which is stated to be a shield. Secondly, being trapped under a vehicle won't help Liquid for long, as all Street Fighters can casually destroy vehicles easily, let alone Cammy. Ultimately, she'd have to engage in one more duel against Liquid until eventually she'd take advantage of her surroundings and allow Liquid to take one fatal step off the cliff and fall to his doom. After this, she'd get on the jet ski with Otacon and return home, knowing she had completed her mission. I hope you all enjoyed this deep dive. I love both of these franchises deeply, and I hope you agree with the outcome of this scenario. Or maybe you don't. Maybe Cammy doesn't have enough time to react to Liquid, or something else that I discussed earlier. But regardless, sound off in the comments and let me know your opinions. Let them be heard. Alright y'all, deuces.